So I remember leaving the MTC, you fly to the mission home, which for the Nairobi mission is in Kenya. It's in the Nairobi city. And so we went to the mission home, which is in Upper Hill, and met with the mission president. He has an interview with you, kind of gets you accustomed to the mission home and office there. And then he assigns you or tells you where you're going to be serving and your first companion or your trainer and such. I was assigned for my first area to go to Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, and so that meant I guess I arrived there, slept over at the assistant's apartment, and then met with the mission president the next day. But I jumped right back on a plane and flew down to Dar es Salaam. And so that was my first area, was in an area called the Bungo, and I served with my trainer, Elder Nsile, and it was a pretty typical, I guess, like, first experience. You're still trying to get down, like, the lessons very well and other things. But the major thing is that what I noticed is that, especially in both countries, I guess, that people aren't super familiar with the gospel. They are pretty good scriptorians because they're very religious people, but they also have a great respect for missionaries or men of God, as they call you. And so you don't really experience a lot of like people spitting on you or anything like that, because they have a general respect for anyone that's like trying to do missionary work. But it was hard. I guess the most difficult part about going straight to Tanzania is that they don't speak English, and they only or exclusively speak Swahili. And so I didn't ever learn that in the MTC. They don't teach it in the MTC currently. And so in addition to trying to teach the lessons or learn the lessons in English, I was now having to learn Swahili at the same time. So that was a little bit difficult, but my companion was very helpful. I mean, he would teach me a little bit by day or every day in the morning. But we didn't take an hour for like language study just because we were busy, and so we just do it throughout the day, which I thought was helpful because there's no better teacher than experience. And so I would just kind of go through the day with my broken Swahili and try. When I was serving there, they didn't let us teach in Swahili, and so we'd contact and meet with people in Swahili. But then when it came to teaching, we would have to switch over to English because the church didn't have all the materials that they wanted or needed for the church to be able to rerun in Swahili published yet or translated yet. Currently, or right now at least, they are allowing it to be taught in Swahili. So the missionaries now know Swahili a lot better than I do. And so now they actually teach in Swahili. So mine was kind of a weird transition stage in where we could talk with people and meet with people in Swahili, but when it came to teaching, we had to do it all in English. So that was my experience. I served in two different areas. Three different areas in Dar es Salaam. I served in a bungo, like I mentioned, for a transfer and a half. There was some complications elsewhere in the mission, and then it caused me to get transferred in the middle of a transfer to be someone else's companion. So I served then in Kinondoni and then in Kinondoni too. So those are just some different areas in Dar es Salaam. It's hot. I guess that's one impression that you get. Dar es Salaam is very hot and humid. I think it's probably the hottest and most humid place on the mission. And I've been to every area, so I can say that with full confidence. I believe it is the hottest and most humid part of the mission. But I mean, just normal missionary attire. You don't ever wear suits. Some missionaries will wear them to zone conferences, and that was the typical thing. But during your proselyting or even to, like, I don't know, church or anything, you just wear white shirt and tie. Some missionaries chose to wear their suits on Sunday, but most didn't. So the Kenya Nairobi Mission, it incorporates all of Kenya and all of Tanzania. There are currently, at least when I was serving there was one stake in Nairobi, a district out in Eldoret, and a district in Chulu, and they were working on getting a district in Mombasa. So when I was there anyways, one stake and two districts in Kenya, and then one district which I've heard is now a stake in Tanzania in Dar es Salaam. For, I guess, areas in Kenya, they run mostly along their major highway. The church is the largest in Nairobi, but because and that's where the church started also, is in Nairobi. People heard of the church, a couple missionaries started the proselyting work. Elder Sitati was one of the first members also. He's now one of the first quorum of the 70s. So he and his family were one of the first kind of like strong families, helped the church grow in Nairobi. But then one of the things about Nairobi is a lot of people move into the city to find jobs or other things. But once they're done working, they move back to their villages or where they're from. And so that's kind of how the church is spread throughout Kenya. So all these places where people have learned the gospel and then went home, there's now branches in those various places. So the most eastern, or I guess it would be most western part of Kenya that there's currently missionary work is in Busia and Kisumu, which is right on Lake Victoria. And then it goes all the way to the coast to Mombasa, but it's right along the major highway. Other large areas of the church in Kenya is in the Chulu and Kilungu Hills. So that's kind of as far as the history or locations of the church. Things about Kenya in particular, there are 42 tribes, each with their own languages, different language. So you aren't required or really expected to learn those as a missionary, so don't be intimidated about that. Most missionaries, you'll speak English primarily, and then you'll learn the greetings and some small talk in the different tribal languages depending where you are. So like when I was serving amongst the Luya, I would learn their greetings. When I would serve amongst the Maasai or the Kikuyu or various others, you would learn their greetings, but really just English, and then Swahili if you serve in Tanzania is all you'll be expected to really learn very well. So Tanzania, the church is newer there and it's not as widespread. Probably one of the major contributors to that is due to the language barrier, how for a long time we were only able to teach in English where they only spoke Swahili. So there are people who speak English in Tanzania. Of course, that's how the church was able to grow. But it's like in high school where we have the option to learn German or Spanish or other things, they have the option to learn English. So most of them take that option because they see it as a viable or like good resource or skill to know. But unless they go to college, they speak it at like as well as I spoke Spanish in high school, which wasn't great. So there's a little bit of restriction there, but now since they've switched over to Swahili, I'm expecting the church will grow a bit faster. But the people of Tanzania, I think, are a bit more receptive to the gospel, regardless of the language. And I love both people, but the Tanzanians are extremely kind. And so the church is currently in Dar es Salaam, where they have their district, and then in Arusha, there's a couple of branches, and then out in, I think it's, there's one other city, I forget the name of it, it's out by Lake Victoria. So just in those 3 cities. A typical life for a Kenyan is, if you have a job, which is good, there's a large majority, I don't know if it's majority, but there's a large percentage that are unemployed. But usually you wake up early, eat your breakfast, and then if you have your job, they will get to their job. They are very, I guess, dedicated to their work. For those that have jobs, they're pretty hardworking, but a large percentage don't have jobs, and so they just kind of meander around. But as far as transportation, the best way that you can commute in Eastern Africa is through their public transportation, unless you have a car. But their public transportation in Kenya is called matatus, and they're just like little vans or small buses. And in Tanzania, they call them daladalas. So the same thing, just different names. And so what you do is there's different routes, and they'll specify their routes. It's not like here in the States where it's like, oh, you go on Green Line to this. They just yell out where they're going. And there's also matatu like stations where each of the different areas, you know where they're going. And to be honest, it's kind of confusing at first, but if you're with someone, your companion that you'll be getting there with, they know the routes, they know where to find everything, so it's not too hard. You just follow them and then pick up on where all the different things are. But yeah, there's no like printout or anything that you can get to be able to navigate through the different areas. But jump on a matatu, they yell out, so they'll yell out where they're going, and you ask them the price. So if you ask them in English, it'll always be more expensive. If you ask them in Swahili, it'll be cheaper. And if they give you an outrageous price, you can bargain with them. That's basically everything in Kenya and Tanzania. It's according to what you agree upon as the price. So you always argue, especially if it's in a new area where missionaries aren't known yet. You'll have to bargain the price because they'll find out that you actually don't have a lot of money, that you're just kind of poor like everybody else. But once they see, if you're white especially, they think that you have a lot of money because you're a tourist. But once they get beyond that, then they're like, oh, yeah, they'll give you the normal price. So what you do is get on, and then they'll have a conductor. So one person will drive, and then their conductor will shake their hand, and it just has a bunch of change in it, and you pay them, and they'll tell you the price for it. And then you just ride. You're not guaranteed a seat, or even if you do have a seat, a full seat, they just pack you in like sardines. So I guess get used to that. The people are nice though. I mean, they're used to being smashed together, even if you're hot and sweaty, like doesn't matter. You just all jump in, get smashed in together. They don't care. I would suggest though, I didn't ever get there wasn't a huge problem with stealing or other things, but if you're wearing a backpack, I mean, it's just common sense that when you get on the matatus or other places where people are going to be pressing up against you, you just swing it around and hold it against your chest or your front, so that way you can see if people are getting into your bag. And I never really had any issues, but I mean, I've heard of missionaries doing it, or having issues, but it's because they didn't swing their backpacks around. Also, as far as like pickpocketing and other things, that's also where a lot of pickpocketing happens. But at the same time, just be smart. Don't have things in your pockets. Where I carried all my money and things was in my white handbook. And so it's like if someone was going to steal from me, they'd have to like rip it off of my chest, which I think is a lot harder and more obvious. So, and that's, I think, pretty typical for a lot of missions, is that missionaries will carry it in their front pocket. So that's basically how you get around in both countries. You walk a lot. Kenyans walk a ton. That's why they're good runners for the Olympics, especially the Maasai. But also, you will walk a lot as a missionary as well. So my suggestion as far as like footwear is, they say in the mission packet, or at least when I got it, that you can wear sandals. Don't wear sandals, because just understand that whatever is on your feet, you'll be walking through the slums with, and there's open sewers and stuff. So unless you want that open sewage in your shoes or in your sandals, don't wear them. So I would suggest just like good walking shoes. I mean, I wore Echoes, but I mean, you don't have to go with like that brand or whatever. Just choose a good walking shoe that you can get a lot of miles out of, and that's comfortable, because you will be walking a lot. Kenyans, they're still nice, but when you compare them to the Tanzanians, they kind of are viewed as mean. But I just think oftentimes they're more honest, which is, a good thing, but also they come off a little bit more rash, or so that you'll get used to that. And as far as like talking to Americans or Europeans, they're still very nice. They're just not Tanzanian nice. So very kind people. A little more harsh than the Tanzanians, but tribalism is very much a part of Kenyan culture. I've mentioned a few times there's 42 tribes, and if you ask a Kenyan, like, who are you, they'll say usually their name, and they'll be like, and I'm, their tribe. They always, or oftentimes will say, and I'm Kikuyu, I'm Luya, I'm all these things, because it's very much a part of their identity and so forth. A lot of the time they will only marry people within their tribe or like cousin tribes, and they won't marry like across, like, because there are like tribes that are in conflict with each other, especially politically. And so that's why in the election times in Kenya's history, especially most recent history, there's been some conflict and some violence regarding the I guess the elections. But as a missionary, you don't have to worry too much about it. They make sure that you stay indoors during those days and stuff. So I know that Africa has like this stereotypical dangerous part of the world. I think you're fine. My mom cried when she heard that I was going to Kenya and Tanzania. I rejoiced. I actually wanted, my cousin served in Uganda, and I always wanted to go to Uganda, but I got to go right next door, which I'm so happy. I love my mission. And so you'll be fine. You know, be smart, but you're going to be fine. But back to Kenyan people, they know they're very tribalistic, but they're very kind and very honest. Like Tanzanians, they are so nice that they will often tell you that they're going to be there. But I think this is common in every mission, regardless of where you are. People promise that they're going to do things, but they don't. And so you just have to get used to that. Also, for both African nations, there is no rush or like hurry in Kenya or in Tanzania. In fact, they have a saying that's haraka haraka aina baraka, which means hurrying brings no blessings. And so like you'll set appointments and just know that if you set it for 1 o'clock, that means that in their mind, it's any time after 1. So it could be between 1 and 5, I don't know. So you just have to help the people understand what you mean by 1 o'clock. So I would jokingly say 1 o'clock Muzungu time, which is like white man time, and then they will laugh. And the thing is that like in America, we have like this conflict of race and other things. You should never be disrespectful or like make racist jokes, but you're white and they are not, and they know it. In fact, the little kids will come up to you and they just chant Mzungu, Mzungu, which means white person, white person, white person. And it's just something, it gets annoying, but you get used to it, and they don't really care about race. So it's not like, I don't know, you don't have this big conflict regarding those things. And you soon, if you're a white missionary, you soon forget that you're white unless the little kids are chanting, and I don't know, you see yourself just as a Kenyan after a while, or a Tanzanian. Kenyans also, I mentioned this earlier, but they're hardworking if they have a job, but a lot of the time they don't. And so you'll see oftentimes men especially like just sitting around or trying to find work or just chatting with friends and other things, which can be discouraging for them. But my advice, some people get mad or they are quick to judge these people that seem to be just being lazy. But if you didn't have a job, what would you do with your day? I mean, it's tough. These people are willing to work. There has, because of some poorly planned like humanitarian aid, there's been kind of a tradition of reliance, which is not really their fault as well. But the people are good, they're hardworking. Just some traditions possibly need to be changed or altered within. It's not really Kenyan tradition, it's more just like recent traditions of reliance, but you'll see those and you'll understand what I mean when you get there. It's kind of hard to explain. Kenyans are great though, they're funny, they ride bikes everywhere in addition to like riding matatus and other things, and they stack everything, and same with Tanzanians. They'll stack, you know, pieces of wood like 10 feet high on their bike and just be pedaling around. And as missionaries, a lot of the time you'll have like competitions of who can get the best or funniest picture of something being put on back of a bike. So you'll see goats or entire families just all on one bike, and it's pretty funny. Kenyans, they're still nice, but when you compare them to the Tanzanians, they kind of are viewed as mean. But I just think oftentimes they're more honest, which is, you know, a good thing, but also they come off a little bit more rash, or so that you'll get used to that. And as far as like talking to Americans or Europeans, they're still very nice. They're just not Tanzanian nice. So very kind people. a little more harsh than the Tanzanians, but tribalism is very much a part of Kenyan culture. I've mentioned a few times there's 42 tribes, and if you ask a Kenyan, like, who are you? They'll say usually their name, and they'll be like, and I'm, their tribe. They always, or oftentimes will say, and I'm Kikuyu, I'm Luya, I'm all these things, because it's very much a part of their identity and so forth. A lot of the time they will only marry people within their tribe or like cousin tribes, and they won't marry like across, like, because there are like tribes that are in conflict with each other, especially politically. And so that's why in the election times in Kenya's history, especially most recent history, there's been some conflict and some violence regarding the elections. But as a missionary, you don't have to worry too much about it. They make sure that you stay indoors during those days and stuff. So I know that Africa has like this stereotypical dangerous part of the world. I think you're fine. My mom cried when she heard that I was going to Kenya and Tanzania. I rejoiced. I actually wanted, my cousin served in Uganda, and I always wanted to go to Uganda, but I got to go right next door, which I'm so happy. I love my mission. And so you'll be fine. Be smart, but you're going to be fine. But back to Kenyan people, they know they're very tribalistic, but they're very kind and very honest. Like Tanzanians, they are so nice that they will often tell you that they're going to be there. But I think this is common in every mission, regardless of where you are. People promise that they're going to do things, but they don't. And so you just have to get used to that. Also, for both African nations, there is no rush or like hurry in Kenya or in Tanzania. In fact, they have a saying that's haraka haraka aina baraka, which means hurrying brings no blessings. And so like you'll set appointments and just know that if you set it for 1 o'clock, that means that in their mind, it's any time after 1. So it could be between 1 and 5, I don't know. So you just have to help the people understand what you mean by 1 o'clock. So I would jokingly say 1 o'clock Mzungu time, which is like white man time, and then they will laugh. And the thing is that like in America, we have like this conflict of race and other things. You should never be disrespectful or like make racist jokes, but you're white and they are not, and they know it. In fact, the little kids will come up to you and they just chant Mzungu, Mzungu, which means white person, white person, white person. And it's just something, it gets annoying, but you get used to it. And they don't really care about race. So it's not like, I don't know, you don't have this big conflict regarding those things. And you soon, if you're a white missionary, you soon forget that you're white unless the little kids are chanting, and I don't know, you see yourself just as a Kenyan after a while, or a Tanzanian. Kenyans also, I mentioned this earlier, but they're hardworking if they have a job, but a lot of the time they don't. And so you'll see oftentimes men especially like just sitting around or trying to find work or just chatting with friends and other things, which can be discouraging for them. But my advice, some people get mad or they are quick to judge these people that seem to be just being lazy. But if you didn't have a job, what would you do with your day? I mean, it's tough. These people are willing to work. There has, because of some poorly planned like humanitarian aid, there's been kind of a tradition of reliance, which is not really their fault as well. But the people are good, they're hardworking. Just some traditions possibly need to be changed or altered within. It's not really a Kenyan tradition, it's more just like recent traditions of reliance, but you'll see those and you'll understand what I mean when you get there. It's kind of hard to explain. Kenyans are great though. They're funny. They ride bikes everywhere in addition to like riding matatus and other things. And they stack everything. And same with Tanzanians. They'll stack, pieces of wood like 10 feet high on their bike and just be pedaling around. And as missionaries, a lot of the time you'll have like competitions of who can get the best or funniest picture of something being put on back of a bike. So you'll see goats or entire families just all on one bike, and it's pretty funny. A typical life for a Kenyan is, if you have a job, which is good, there's a large majority, I don't know if it's majority, but there's a large percentage that are unemployed. But usually you wake up early, eat your breakfast, and then if you have your job, they're very, they will get to their job. They are very, I guess, dedicated to their work. For those that have jobs, they're pretty hardworking, but a large percentage don't have jobs, and so they just kind of meander around. But as far as transportation, the best way that you can commute in Eastern Africa is through their public transportation, unless you have a car. But their public transportation in Kenya is called matatus, and they're just like little vans or small buses. And in Tanzania, they call them dala-dalas. So the same thing, just different names. And so what you do is there's different routes, and they'll specify their routes. It's not like here in the States where it's like, oh, you go on Green Line to this. They just yell out where they're going. And there's also matatu like stations where each of the different areas, you know where they're going. And to be honest, it's kind of confusing at first, but if you're with someone, your companion that you'll be getting there with, they know the routes, they know where to find everything, so it's not too hard. You just follow them and then pick up on where all the different things are. But yeah, there's no like printout or anything that you can get to be able to navigate through the different areas. But jump on a matatu, they'll yell out where they're going, and you ask them the price. So if you ask them in English, it'll always be more expensive. If you ask them in Swahili, it'll be cheaper. And if they give you an outrageous price, you can bargain with them. That's basically everything in Kenya and Tanzania. It's according to what you agree upon as the price. So you always argue, especially if it's in a new area where missionaries aren't known yet. You'll have to bargain the price because they'll find out that you actually don't have a lot of money, that you're just kind of poor like everybody else. But once they see, if you're white especially, they think that you have a lot of money because you're a tourist. But once they get beyond that, then they're like, oh, yeah, they'll give you the normal price. So what you do is get on, and then they'll have a conductor, so one person will drive, and then their conductor will shake their hand, and it just has a bunch of change in it, and you pay them, and they'll tell you the price for it. And then you just ride. You're not guaranteed a seat, or even if you do have a seat, a full seat, they just pack you in like sardines. So I guess get used to that. The people are nice though. I mean, they're used to being smashed together, even if you're hot and sweaty, like doesn't matter. You just all jump in, get smashed in together. They don't care. I would suggest though, I didn't ever get there wasn't a huge problem with stealing or other things, but if you're wearing a backpack, I mean, it's just common sense that when you get on the matatus or other places where people are going to be pressing up against you, you just swing it around and hold it against your chest or your front, so that way you can see if people are getting into your bag. And I never really had any issues, but I mean, I've heard of missionaries doing it, or having issues, but it's because they didn't swing their backpacks around. Also, as far as pickpocketing and other things, that's also where a lot of pickpocketing happens. But at the same time, just be smart. Don't have things in your pockets. Where I carried all my money and things was in my white handbook. And so it's if someone was going to steal from me, they'd have to rip it off of my chest, which I think is a lot harder and more obvious. So, and that's, I think, pretty typical for a lot of missions, is that missionaries will carry it in their front pocket. So that's basically how you get around in both countries. You walk a lot. Kenyans walk a ton. That's why they're good runners for the Olympics, especially the Maasai. But also, you will walk a lot as a missionary as well. So my suggestion as far as footwear is, they say in the mission packet, or at least when I got it, that you can wear sandals. Don't wear sandals, because just understand that whatever is on your feet, you'll be walking through the slums with, and there's open sewers and stuff. So unless you want that open sewage in your shoes or in your sandals, don't wear them. So I would suggest just like good walking shoes. I mean, I wore Echoes, but I mean, you don't have to go with like that brand or whatever. Just choose a good walking shoe that you can get a lot of miles out of, and that's comfortable because you will be walking a lot. Starting with Kenyan food, the like staple or what most people eat day to day, I guess we'll start with breakfast, is just like toast or something simple, maybe some chapati, and then which is like tortillas, and then the like national drink of Kenya is chai or tea. So that poses a difficulty for as a missionary, but they usually like to drink some hot beverage in the morning. So you have to like switch them over to something that's not against the word of wisdom. But that's a typical Kenyan breakfast. As missionaries, I mean, you eat what you want. I usually ate eggs and toast just because it's cheap. But you can eat whatever you want. For a typical Kenyan lunch is something called ugali and sukuma wiki. And ugali, as you'll get to know, they call it different things throughout Kenya, but it's just corn flour that's boiled. And so it kind of has the consistency of Play-Doh. It doesn't really have any taste. It's just really like a caloric filler, so it like gets you through the day. It's not like tasty though. Some people don't like it, and I don't know how you can't not like it, because it doesn't really taste like anything. It just doesn't taste good. So it's just like you're eating something to fill your stomach. And then sukuma wiki is just a green. I think they call it collard greens in English, and it's just something to give the ugali flavor. So that's like a pretty typical meal. You'll eat a lot of cow or beef, but it's not like your typical nice cuts of beef. It's usually what a lot of missionaries will call bubblegum beef, because you can chew it for days and it doesn't seem to get any less big or chewy. So you just kind of have to get used to eating like low quality cuts of meat. Other things that you'll eat are more fancy meals. They have a lot of different traditional foods. Mukimo is like mashed potatoes with beans and pumpkin leaves and corn mixed in together. That's probably one of my more favorite meals. It's a Kikuyu dish. They also have chapati. There's a lot of Arabic influence in Kenya because of the slave trade in East Africa was run out of Zanzibar, which is in Tanzania, but a lot of the slaves were traded from this area, and so there's a lot of Arab influences, and still today, especially along the coast, a lot of Arab influences. So your typical Arabian foods are there. You have different curries and other things, but as a missionary, unless you're teaching people from that descent, you're probably not going to eat those things, but they do have a lot of the spices and more of the like flatbreads and stuff that you can get as well. There's other greens, so like ugali is like the staple, and then you just eat everything with it. So whether it be a stew or various other things that they'll make, you'll eat it. To be honest, I don't think Kenyan food is very hard to like. It's just not very flavorful. It has like no spice, and it's quite bland. So it's not like you're gonna love it, but I don't think you're gonna hate it per se. And then over time, your taste buds, I guess, get more sensitive, and you actually find the taste that's in the food. But it's quite bland, but not something that you're gonna, in my opinion, I didn't have a hard time enjoying a meal. It just was kind of bland. I served the majority of my mission in rural areas, and so my experiences are not going to be uniform across. A lot of missionaries spend almost their entire missions in the cities. I spent, except for like 6 months of my mission, in rural areas. So my experience with Kenyans is more of like the rural type. But one of the areas I served in was in an area called Kitale. It's in the western portion of Kenya in Rift Valley. And it's a farming community. And it's also where a lot of the election violence in 2008 happened, where a lot of people were like killed or like thrown out of their home. Just a lot of bad things happened, to make a brief story of it. But one of the people that I met there, his name is Brother Kaka, which is ironic and funny, not because in Spanish that word means something bad, but Kaka in Swahili means brother, so his name is literally brother. So I thought that was funny. But he and his family, they were of a different tribe than the area around it. And due to the election violence, they were from rivaling tribes, I guess I should say. And so due to the election, some conflict there, he was surrounded by or living in an area that was all the other tribe. And so he and his family literally had to take just what they could hold in their hands and run or flee for their lives out of their home. And they walked for several days, hiding during the day in anywhere they can and walking by night until they eventually got to someone's home out of their area that they knew would keep them safe. And so after a few weeks, they were able to, the election violence and hostility died down, and they were able to, I guess, resume their normal lives. The problem being is that their house and everything had been destroyed. And he was a tailor, and so he didn't, all of his equipment was also destroyed in the fire that people had done or had burned down their house. And so he had moved into the city of Kitale, which is, it's a small town, like very small. But he was working out of his one-bedroom apartment where he had his wife and 4 kids all in their one-bedroom apartment, you could say. And he was trying to get things together so that he could continue working as a tailor. He found an old sewing machine, fixed it up, and other things. The reason why I give all this background is just to explain that he kind of had a hard life, and especially most recently had a very difficult time due to things that were outside of his control and not his fault. And so when I first met him and his family, he was, the thing that I first noticed about him, he was always smiling, and I was like, this guy is like living on top of the world. I'm just so surprised that this guy is happy all the time. And as we continue to meet with he and his family, they in their prayers, something that I would always notice is that they never complained about anything. They would offer a ton of thanks for all the things that they had, and then they would ask for some, just the basic things. They would be very like direct or things that they were praying for. But he always had an aura of gratitude and thankfulness. Later, the more we met with them, one time he just wanted to meet with us, and we were talking about hardship and sometimes how things don't go the way that we are hoping and so forth. And we just asked him, Brother Kaka, do you have something of an experience like this? Because we were trying to help the kids understand some principles. And he was like, why, yes, I do. And so he shared his story with us, and I was in tears because of the difficulty that they had gone through. But when you look at the family, you would never guess. And that is, I guess, the amazing part of, or amazing attribute of this family and of many people in Eastern Africa. We think that our difficulties are hard, but they go through so much more, and they do it with a smile on their face, and they're just grateful for everything that they have. And so that was a time in my mission where I really got to know and see how blessed I am, but also how blessed how God blesses all of his children with different attributes that they need to be able to live their lives. His family is now doing great. I still keep in contact with them, and they are, doing better. His business, of course, isn't flourishing, but they're being able to make ends meet. And it just is amazing to me, the dedication and the love that God has for each of his children, and being able to help us through, regardless of anything that we have. And they're still great people, And so, I don't know, that was just one story that I had of the I guess, stalwartness or the strength of the Kenyan people and of people in Eastern Africa in general. Not every Kenyan is good at running. In fact, the majority are not. There's a couple of tribes that are well known for their running, and they're like the ones that always, when you see them in the Olympics, right away, just looking at their skull and their face structure. One thing that you'll learn in Eastern Africa, especially in Kenya, when you get familiar with the tribes, just by looking at someone, you can tell what tribe they're from. And so they don't, like, when you watch the Olympics, they'll announce their tribe as well because they're proud of what tribe they're from. But just by looking at them, you can already tell if you're familiar with the tribes. But it's usually the Maasai, or there's another, I think it's the Turkana or another tribe up north. And they're more of these nomadic, or traditionally, and a lot of them still live the traditional lifestyle. Some don't, though. They walk all day. They're herdsmen, so they like walk with their cattle all day, and or sheep or whatever they take care of. And they are just known for walking and running all day, and so it's been a part of their lifestyle for generations and generation and generation. And so I guess you could say, due to the genes being continued, if you're a good walker, then it might mean that you get married or whatever and have children. They're able to have these genes that just really, I guess, help out with endurance, because they can just run or walk all day. And Maasai are especially known for that. You'll see that, like, they'll wear sandals, but they're made out of tires, because tire sandals last forever. I have a pair. I've worn them for a couple of years. They look as good as, or as ugly as the day I bought them. So yeah, they never run out, and so that's why they wear those sandals. Tanzanians, so tribalism is something that is common throughout Africa, and so it's kind of like you're loyal to your tribe first, and then like your cousin tribes, and then sometimes there is animosity or like conflict between rivaling tribes, either politically or other things. In Tanzania, though, there's over 100, and one of their presidents in the past kind of united all the tribes and like forced everyone to speak Swahili, which was, some people didn't like, but now the nation is very unified, and like the people are extremely nice and accepting of everybody. And so, as I mentioned, the Swahili, or the Tanzanian people, they don't speak English, and they really only speak Swahili very well, or they speak that very well. And so that's one of the, I guess, communication barriers that when you're talking to a Tanzanian, you'll have to overcome. But there's not any conflict as far as, I guess, for their culture as tribalism or other things that you see in a lot of other African nations. So the people are extremely nice. They cook well. These are just like things that missionaries, it's like the stereotypical characteristics of what we love about the Tanzanian people. Very nice. They cook well. There's a lot of Arabic influences, and so especially in Dar es Salaam. And so even if they are Christian, a lot of the time they won't wear like the full Arab or Islamic get up for like the women or anything, but they will wear very modest clothes. The men typically are seen kind of as, there is definitely like, men are viewed higher in society than women. Polygamy is very common in both countries, where a man will have more than one wife, and it's not kind of viewed as strange. So like when you tell the history of the church, you're like, oh yeah, there was polygamy a few years, or like, several, or like 50 years or 100 years ago. They're like, oh, same with me. My grandpa was a polygamist. And so that does kind of present some issues as far as like doing baptismal interviews and other things, but you'll learn the procedures, and it's not difficult at all. They just have to have an interview with the mission president, or usually through the phone, to like fix that. But yeah, so as far as that, Tanzanians are known for being extremely kind. They'll never tell you no, which is kind of annoying at times. You'll be like, are you going to come to church? And they'll be like, yes, save me a seat. I will be there. And you get that seat polished, and it'll probably be empty. But they are very accepting of the gospel. I cannot complain as far as, yeah, you get a lot of empty promises, but the people are extremely ready for the gospel. The Tanzanian people have been prepared. I remember when Elder Holland came and he did a training with some of the leadership of the mission. He said that it's Africa's time, and I truly do believe that. You'll see when you go, or if you have the opportunity to go, that the African people in general are prepared, and you'll be able to see that as you work with them. They are extremely spiritual people. Sometimes have some commitment issues, but love them to death for sure. So that's kind of the typical Tanzanian. They're known for just being nice. Tanzanian food, very similar. They eat, so like chapatis in Kenya, they eat mostly for like dinner and for lunch. But in Tanzania, they almost exclusively just eat it for breakfast, which is kind of weird. And then they eat a lot of rice. That's more of their staple, almost equal to ugali. They also cook their ugali a lot softer, so it's not quite as hard. They make fun of or tease the Kenyans for eating their hard or rock ugali. Tanzanians also put a bit more spice in their food, which is nice, especially in Dar es Salaam because it's right on the coast and it has a lot of that Arabian influence or that Arab influence. Also, especially in Dar es Salaam, there's a lot of Muslims and Islamic influence, which also you get more of the flatbreads and other things, which I enjoyed. I like Tanzanian food more. In other parts of Tanzania, like up in Arusha, it's very green and they have a lot of bananas and other things, so you'll eat those. Usually this only happens if the family that you're like eating with or whatever is from Uganda, but you can eat a thing called matoke, which is kind of like mashed potatoes, but bananas or plantains instead of the potatoes, and it tastes very similar, or cooked bananas, which sometimes I like them. Like, again, the food isn't like, at first it might be a little bland and a little bit unusual, but it's not something that the flavor just kicks you in the mouth and you're like, I can't stand this. Although there are parts of animals that you've never thought were edible that you will eat. So like hearts, chicken hearts, and livers are pretty typical, which aren't that unique, but sometimes you'll eat like the kidneys or the lungs, which is kind of difficult to stomach. Just texturally, the taste isn't too bad. When you eat fish, they eat the entire fish, head included. So I never really liked the eyes, so I never ate them. That's like, they are not offended because there's Tanzanians and Kenyans that don't like the eyes, but you'll eat like the cheeks and everything else. I like fish, so it wasn't much of an issue. But then in Tanzania, especially along the coast, they will feed you omena, which are like little minnows, but they're like dried and salted. And that was probably the one food that I never really got to like. I ate them a bunch because that's like where I started my mission, but it never became something I enjoyed or ever like even could, force myself to enjoy. So it's just, you're eating these little minnows basically that are like full-bodied. They're not good. They usually have like, you see them sold in the stores and they're like flies all over them. So the whole time I'm eating, I'm just like, I'm eating these rotten little fish. But, whatever. They're not that bad. I just think I didn't like them. Probably more of a mental thing than anything else. But everything else, the food's pretty typical. If you want to go to, well, I guess I should just say this. You don't ever hear of like going to a Kenyan restaurant or a Tanzanian restaurant anywhere, because the food simply isn't that good, but it's not terrible. It's not going to like make you gag or anything. It's just not very flavorful. Just got called to the Kenya Nairobi Mission. First bit I would say is get excited. It's amazing. It's an amazing mission. You're getting called to an exotic part of the world. But the other thing that I would say is decide now what type of missionary you want to be. When you get to Kenya and when you start serving, you'll be able to see all different types of missionaries and all different types of work. But just decide what type of missionary you want to be and become that missionary. If it's a hardworking missionary that works tirelessly, then do that. As far as other advice that I would give would be, don't stress about getting the nicest and newest equipment for going there, especially if you're coming from America. Anything you have is going to be plenty nice and probably nicer than a lot of your companions. So, have the things that you need. Make sure that they're up to the standards of work, but make sure that they're durable and that you're going to be comfortable living in the areas that you are. So, I know your mom's going to want to pack like double of everything, but tell her to maybe relax a little bit, and just what they ask for in the mission letter is plenty good. Other things that I guess, or pieces of advice, is just get good shoes, multiple pairs of shoes. Maybe I wore 2 shoes, or I had 2 pairs of shoes, and they lasted me my entire mission. I would alternate them every day. Being able to wear one every other day, I've heard, makes your shoes last longer. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but make sure to polish them and you'll be good. But other than that, you'll love your mission. You really will. If you go in just knowing that, knowing your purpose. So go serve hard, work hard. I think there's a lot of wisdom in the song Called to Serve. It says, onward, ever onward, twice before it says forward. So just know that you sometimes have to work, onward, ever onward before the work goes forward. So just be ready to work. It is a mission, but you'll love it. I had a testimony before my mission. I don't doubt that. That's why I went on my mission, is because I knew the church was true, and I knew God loved me, and I knew that Jesus Christ was my Savior. But there has been no other event or thing that I have done that has strengthened my testimony more. Teaching the principles of the gospel, things that we often take for advantage if you grew up in the church, and seeing how that changes somebody's life is priceless. You will be able to see the gospel in action, which is amazing. Another unique thing that you will probably have the opportunity to do is also teach people about Jesus Christ as being the Savior of the world. I taught quite a few different Islamic people, I guess, a role that was different, or a role that is different in our beliefs than is in theirs regarding Jesus Christ. And as I saw Jesus Christ and the concept of someone that had paid the price for their sins, and the way that they could repent and be able to apply the atonement was just amazing. There has been no other thing I've never regretted serving my mission. I loved it. I was fortunate enough to never ever feel homesick. There were times that I wish I had a Walmart or a grocery store that had food that I was familiar with, but there wasn't ever a concern as far as if I was in the correct place. I know that the church is true. Serving there and being able to help the church grow has solidified that knowledge that I had before my mission, and also helped develop it even further upon my mission. I know the Book of Mormon is true. As I read it in Kenya, it was reaffirmed to me on multiple occasions the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon and the principles that it teaches. If we live the principles in the Book of Mormon, there's very little we have to worry about as far as other things in our lives. Yeah, we have careers or other things, but it's not that significant. I know that you'll love your mission. I'll just go back to that. You'll love your mission. Just work hard. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
First little while going to Kenya was pretty crazy. I went to the South Africa MTC, and so that was a little bit kind of getting there to being in Africa. Obviously, we were in the MTC the whole time, so it wasn't too crazy. We didn't see anything too intense. But as we got to Nairobi, that's when we definitely realized we were in a very different world than where we could just come from. And my first area was in Kenya. It was in a place called Eldoret, and I lived in a little bit of a rougher area in Eldoret. It was in the outskirts of town, and I just remember that first bus ride, because we got on a bus and we had to ride for 8 hours to my area. And I just remember looking out the window and just seeing, the acacia tree, the flat tops trees, and seeing zebras and seeing, giraffe on the side of the road and all these, cool stuff, and just realizing, I'm in Africa. This isn't, I'm not planning my mission anymore. I'm here, and it's time to begin. And, most people as they go on their mission in general, but especially to my mission, they always say, that first couple weeks is really hard and those first couple days is really hard. And for me, I didn't feel that. I really was so excited to be there, and I loved it so much that it just wasn't a hard adjustment for me. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed, seeing a different world and seeing a different culture and a different people, and I loved them before I even met them. And so that mental preparation, I feel like, helped me a lot for those first couple of days. It was obviously different. My trainer was from Zimbabwe, and he, was different than anyone I've ever lived with. And so that was a little bit of an adjustment just to living with someone from a different culture, but it wasn't that bad. But, going and seeing, the streets are dirt streets. I mean, it's Africa. It's exactly what you think of. That's what we lived in. And it was fun. It was crazy. It was exciting. It was, a little nervous at first just to get into the feel of teaching and bearing testimony and inviting and all those things was a little bit hard at first. And, in Kenya, they speak English most of the time, but the kids don't speak English. They speak Swahili, and some of them don't speak that good of English anyways. And so that, language barrier and trying to pick up on the little things that are different about a new place was really quite fun. To be able to learn about a new culture and about a new people. I really enjoyed those first couple of weeks. And, it was only up from there. The rest of my mission just grew upon those first couple of weeks. The Kenya Nairobi Mission is definitely a very unique mission and very different, because when you receive your call, you're going to be called to teach the language or teach the gospel in the English language. That's what I read when I opened my call. And, at first I saw, I'm going to Kenya, and I was so excited. And I saw I was going to South Africa MTC. I was so excited. And then it said, you're going to speak English. And I was like, wait, what? I'm speaking English when I'm going to Africa? I don't really understand how that works. And so as I got there, I found out that our mission covers 2 countries. It's not just Kenya. It's Kenya and Tanzania, which is just south of Kenya. And Kenya and Tanzania is on the east coast of Africa, just underneath the Horn of Africa. And in Kenya, the gospel is preached in English, but in Tanzania, the church and everything is conducted in Swahili, and everyone speaks Swahili. There's very little English spoken by general public as well as by members of the church, and so you teach the gospel in Swahili, you give talks in Swahili, you pray in Swahili, you ask for bread at the shop in Swahili. And so it's kind of a unique mission, because you could spend a year teaching in English, which I did. I spent a year in Kenya teaching in English, and then switched all of a sudden to being in Tanzania for another year teaching only in Swahili. And so, that it's a unique mission in that it's a split language mission. It's not just English and it's not just Swahili. It's both, depending on where you're at. But it's the mission. The members in Tanzania are just over 1,000. In Kenya, I think it's 3,000, somewhere around there. When I first got up there was about 80 missionaries. When the peak of our mission while I was there, we got up to like 116, and then we were supposed to keep growing, but currently there's some problems with visas. The government's not giving visas to a lot of missionaries, and so it's kind of gone down. They've had to close areas and stuff because of a lack of missionaries being able to get into the country. So it kind of fluctuates on the size. It's not very, for 2 countries, it's not a whole lot of missionaries. But that's because the church is mainly in southern Kenya, in that southern from the west coast from the west all the way to the east coast. And then in Tanzania, it's mostly in northern Tanzania, from west to east coast. And there's, 1 stake in the whole mission. All the rest, there's, I think, 3 other districts. And then, all the rest are branches and stuff off of that. And so it's developing, it's growing. It's not quite there yet, but as time goes on, it's definitely growing. The church is growing quickly in all of Africa, not just in East Africa. But that's kind of the geographic area of where things are. The mission, as the Kenya Nairobi Mission, the way it is now, has been around since 1992, when it split off from the Uganda Kampala Mission, and has been growing since then. Another crazy thing about the Kenyan Nairobi Mission is that in Kenya you have 42 different tribes, and in Tanzania you have over 100 tribes with all of their own distinct languages and distinct cultures and traditions. Especially as you go from Kenya to Tanzania, you'll find there's a big difference between the people. Between Swahili itself, Swahili is very different in Kenya than it is in Tanzania. In Tanzania it's more of a deep Swahili. It's more of the original stuff, whereas in Kenya they mix it with English and with their own tribal languages. So it's more pure in Tanzania. But the culture is quite a bit different as well. In Kenya, the culture is very tribal. They're very proud of their tribe. They love their tribe. You have the Kikuyu tribe, you have the Kamba tribe, you have the Kalenjin tribe, and like I said, 40 other tribes. And all of them kind of have their little differences. They have different food. But generally in Kenya, what you're going to see like food-wise, and it's still part of their culture, is ugali, which is corn flour mixed with water, cooked over a jiko, which is a charcoal stove. And that's kind of the substance of the meal. And then they eat it with sukuma wiki, which is, here we know it as like collard greens or kale. There they use that, and that's their main food, especially in Kenya, is ugali and sukuma wiki. And in general, people in East Africa, especially in Tanzania, are very welcoming. Tanzanians, they pride themselves in being a very welcoming, kind people. And so you go to someone's house around lunchtime, around dinner time, and they're going to want to feed you. If they've got food cooking, they want you to stay. They want you to be able to enjoy their food. And it's very rude to deny their food, to reject them. They get very upset actually if you were to say no, I'm full, or I don't want it. They get very offended by that, because they love to give. And even though they don't have very much themselves, they want to make sure that you have been given something. And it's actually a custom that if someone enters your home, you have to give them something. So if they don't give you food, they're at least going to give you a soda or water, and they have to give you something. It's just part of the culture. And so, as a missionary, that's kind of a nice thing, because, there's good food that you get and good soda and stuff like that. And I guess, the food could be hard for some people who aren't used to that kind of food, I guess, or that kind of cooking conditions or cleanliness. But like I said, it's very rude to reject them. And so I knew of missionaries who didn't eat any of the food that they were given, but they also weren't very liked by the people because they felt like they didn't love them, because they weren't accepting their food. And so, you need to be smart. Don't go around and just eat anything they put in front of you. If it looks questionable, then you should question it. But also don't be so, I can't eat this. Like, I've never tried this before, I'm never going to touch it. You have to be humble and be willing to understand their point of view, that they want you to be able to indulge in their culture the way that you would expect them to indulge in your culture if they were to come here in the United States. And so the food will be different, obviously. The water doesn't taste as good as you would maybe like it to. But like I said, if someone welcomes you in their home, they're going to want to give you something. So that's kind of a very big cultural taboo, is to say no. It's very important that you do take those things. And then, like I said, in Kenya, life's a little bit more, I don't want to say westernized, but a little bit more fast-paced. People like to get around and do things, but yet they're always late to things, which is kind of weird to me. It's kind of a paradox to me. But in Tanzania, people are very respectful, and the children are very respectful, love to see you. In Kenya, when kids see you, they're just going to follow you around everywhere, and they're going to yell Mzungu, which means white person. And there's only a couple things in English that kids in Kenya know, and that's how are you and I'm fine. And they'll chant it as you walk past, how are you? How are you? How are you? And they don't even care if you respond. They just like to chant it to white people. So that's something that, you're definitely going to want to get used to. But also, there's a lot of poverty. You're going to see a lot of poor kids, street kids. Especially in Kenya, there's what they call chokaras, which is a street child, basically, who's grown up on the street, has no family, and they sit around in the streets begging. And a lot of times they have a little plastic bottle that they fill with glue, and they huff it. So they're high most of the time, and they're always going to be begging you for money, and will pickpocket if needs be. And so that's kind of a hard thing to adjust to, coming from wherever you're from. If it's from Utah, if it's from California, or from New York, or from anywhere, it's a different culture. There's a lot of poor people. There's a lot of people with disabilities, physically, missing legs, missing arms, begging on the streets. And so it's kind of something that you have to realize you can't save everyone money-wise, especially as a missionary. You're actually, there's a rule that you're not supposed to give money. And so, be wise in what you do. Make sure that you understand that there's a lot of people, and if you give to one, then they're all going to come to you, and it could be actually dangerous because they might think you have money and try to take it forcefully. So, but it's just getting used to the culture, getting used to the people, getting used to the way things are done in East Africa. Well, before I tell the hyena story, I'll kind of preface it with that East Africa, Kenya and Tanzania is an amazing place. People, obviously everyone's heard of how Africa is a lot of the time. And before I say anything else, I want to make sure that you understand that it's a wonderful place. I loved being in Kenya. I loved being in Tanzania. And I definitely want to go back to be able to see the people again and to see the place, because I loved being there, and you will love being there just as much as I did. And it's just, the people are so kind and so humble, and it's a lot of fun. It's a great place to be. It's the best mission in the world, because it's such a different experience than anything you'd ever experienced before and ever could experience, because it's just so much fun. I love the place. And there is dangers no matter where you go. There's dangerous things in Utah, and obviously there's dangerous things in Africa, and it's all about being smart and being wise. And so the story, I guess technically it was my fault. So I guess it'd be kind of a confession. We were going home one night, and I lived in this area called Chulu, which is, when you picture like the African village, bush, game park area, like where animals live, that's where I lived. It was a very tiny village with like 12 shops, and that was the village. And then all the people lived out in the bush and had farms of maize, which is just corn. And as we were emailing home at the church, because it was the only place that we could get internet access, and it was because they had a modem that got wireless internet. And we were there emailing, and we kind of got lost track of time, and it was late one night, and we were supposed to be home by 6 every day, because after 6 it gets dark, because it's right on the equator. And so after 6 o'clock it gets dark, and we're supposed to be home before that, because after dark is when the animals come out. Well, we lost track of time, and we were coming home past 6. It was dark, and me and my companion got to the fence to unlock our fence to be able to get into our house. And as we were there, we heard behind us hyenas whooping, whoop, 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 whoop. And obviously we were terrified, because we just knew there was these hyenas, and we could tell they were right behind us. So I was on with the key, and I just remember jiggling that lock trying to get the key, and I'm nervous, and I finally get the key, and I get it open, and we just opened the gate, sprinted in towards the house, slammed it behind us, and got inside the house and locked it. And we did not go out the rest of that night, because we were pretty shaken up by that, just knowing that they were right there. And that's obviously an example of how obedience will protect you, because if we would have been home on time, we wouldn't have had that danger. So as long as you're smart and you follow the mission rules, obviously you're not going to get attacked by hyenas and they're not going to rip your arms off or anything. But it was definitely a funny experience to have hyenas chase us into the house. Most people got, not most, I shouldn't say most, some people got robbed at some point. Not usually too scary of a situation, but there was one elder who was robbed at gunpoint in Nairobi, in the capital city of Kenya. And so, things like that happen. A lot of pickpocketing happens. I always made sure my back pocket where my wallet was buttoned, and so I never had any problem with it. And I never did get robbed my whole mission. But as long as you're safe, and right now in Kenya there is some unrest with different tribes, but there always is. And so it's nothing too serious, but you just need to make sure that you're in safe places, and the mission is very good at telling you where not to go because of dangerous situations. But yeah, some people have been robbed at gunpoint or different things like that. The best, I'd say, conversion stories that happened in my mission was I was in an area called Mwanza, which is on the shores of Lake Victoria, the largest lake in Africa. And when I first got there, the work wasn't very good, let's just say. We didn't really have any true progressing investigators. We didn't really have anyone who was coming to church. And for 3 or 4 months, I would have just cried if I would have seen someone come to church, because we just never saw any investigators come to church. And the branch was new. It had only been there for 2 years at the time. And we were working hard trying to find people, but no one wanted to come, mostly because it was a new church and people were just, afraid of anything new. But when I first got there, there was a person that my companion told me that they had seen once or twice, named Ali Hassan. And that we would be visiting him, and he lived very far away from the church, where you had to take a public transportation bus, which is called a dala, which is just basically, it's like a van that we'd have here with way too many seats inside, and they fill the seats, and then they have people stand up inside the dala, like just pack it as much as they can, until they can't even close the door, and then that's when you go. And so we'd have to get in the dala and ride for a while to be able to get to where Ali Hassan was staying. And then we had to hike a very steep, rocky hill to be able to get to him. And he owned a salon where him and his wife would cut women's hair and do weaves and all those things. And when we first met him, he was Muslim, which was obviously a problem, difficult at the time. And he was good. He was starting to develop faith in Jesus Christ, and he was searching for Christianity, because he said that he used to, after going to the mosque, he would go to Christian churches and sit in the window and listen to the preacher preaching. And he had seen places in the Quran that made him believe that maybe that Jesus was the Christ. And so he was kind of seeking for that truth. And so luckily he was good friends with the Elders Quorum president who introduced us. And he had good faith, but he didn't really take it seriously. He didn't come to church. He had been to church, I think, once. And he just didn't really take it too much serious. And we taught him for a while, but it just didn't seem like he was progressing. He didn't read his Book of Mormon. He didn't come to church. He didn't do any of those things. Well, one of my companion who I had left the area, and a new companion came. And we hadn't seen Ali Hassan for probably 3 weeks after he came to church for general conference, and then he didn't come back. And we didn't have time to be able to go out and see him because it was far away. And so when my new companion came, I decided, okay, we're going to go bring him back. And so we went out and we saw him. And, I said, I asked him, how did you like general conference? He said, I liked it. And I felt prompted to ask him what he wanted by meeting us, or what he expected to get from us. And he kind of told us that, he wants to learn about Jesus Christ and all this stuff. And I explained to him that, we're not just here just to talk, but that we expect him to act upon our message, and that is a message of happiness that can bring happiness to his family, but he needs to be the one to take the initiative to seek after the answers, and to find out the truth of the Book of Mormon, and to read it. And I think after that week, he never missed church again. And so I was there in that area for 6 months, and he started coming to church. He was reading the Book of Mormon regularly, and he would do everything that we asked him to do, because he said that he received, after I said that, and after he had a chance to pray about it, he came to know that it was true and that he was something that he wanted, and he completely changed. Him and his wife were so happy to finally be a part of the gospel. And his wife was a little tentative at first. She was a Christian in another church and wasn't sure if she wanted to join or to change churches. And it took a really great member named Margaret, who went with us, and having her there, you could see her countenance change, and she suddenly started to feel comfortable. And after that day, she came to receive a testimony of the truth. And so on my last Saturday in that area, after 6 months of trying, those two were baptized. Ali-Hassan and his wife Kusiwa. They were so excited to be baptized. They, were just ecstatic. They couldn't, contain themselves. They were just smiling all the time, and they threw themselves a baptism party afterwards and invited the whole branch to their house to have some food, because they were just so happy to be finally a member of the church and to have found the true church, because Ali Hassan had been searching for that true gospel for so long after realizing that he believes in the Savior. And to be a part of that and to have worked so hard for it, because he wasn't progressing for so long, but then he finally came to know it was amazing, and it was a miracle for sure. For him, to go from Islam to Christianity was not an easy step. He was, disowned by a lot of his family, but he knew that the Book of Mormon was true and he couldn't deny it. And so he was baptized that last Saturday, and I left the next week, and he still is going strong, has callings, and is an amazing member of the church. And it's funny how the events kind of went together, and after so long trying, he finally came to know the truth, and it was truly a miracle. The most important thing as you prepare to go on a mission, or as you prepare to serve in any capacity, especially in the Kenya Nairobi Mission, is to prepare yourself by knowing the gospel. I was born and raised in the church, but to really know it all, to be able to know places in the scriptures that you can teach from, and to be able to testify to them with power and with authority, it requires a lot of effort. It requires a lot of trying hard, and a lot of study, and a lot of pondering, and as you do that, you'll be so much more prepared to be able to testify to people of something that you know to be true, because you cannot convert someone above your own level of conversion. So the best advice I can give to you as you prepare to go out and to serve, and especially to serve in the Kenya Nairobi Mission, is the first thing is charity. The pure love of Christ will help you to not only to adjust to living in a place where you're not comfortable and you're not familiar with, but also to having the Spirit to be with you. Because if you do not love the people who you are serving, and if you do not want them to be able to grow, and want them to, receive that strong testimony and to find the joy that you've found, nothing else really will matter. So the most important thing is to love the people, love the culture, love the language as you're trying to learn Swahili in Tanzania, and as you love everyone, you will find that the Spirit will direct you to people who are prepared, because there's no greater joy than loving people on your mission, because it's finally a full love of every person that you meet. It doesn't matter if it's the branch president or the drunk on the end of the road. If you will have that pure love of Christ, that charity for all men, you are going to have a mission that will change the rest of your life. It will change who you are, and that's the most important thing, is changing. As you go on a mission, don't go and say, I'm good now. I've been out on my mission for a year. I know how to do things. I'm good. You need to be willing to change all the time. Always be seeking to become better, to become a better missionary, and to serve harder, to work harder, to pray more, to fast more, to learn the lessons better, to love more, to become more Christ-like, more humble, more teachable, more patient, more kind, and more obedient. And as you do those things, it will change you not only as a missionary, but it will change who you are when you return home. You won't be the same person that left 2 years ago if you will allow your mission to change you. There is no better time to change and to become better than on a mission, because it is time for you to have that whole time to reflect on yourself, your level of commitment and your level of obedience and your level of diligence and love. And so no matter where you go, no matter what areas you serve in, no matter who your companion is, simply love and seek to change, seek to become better in all that you do. And I know that through the atonement, that you can change and you can become better. The Savior knows what you're going through, no matter where your area is, no matter how hard things have become or how little you understand your companion. If you will seek Him, He will be there for you, and He knows exactly what you're going through. And so that's through prayer. And I know that you're doing what's right. You're doing what the Lord wants you to do, and that you are going to be greatly, greatly, greatly blessed for serving in the Kenya Nairobi Mission and for serving with all of your heart. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.